Welcome everybody as we're letting everybody in, so we'll get started in just a moment, but thank you all for being here with us today.
Hi, everybody.
All right. I see we're getting a couple more people arriving in the room, but thank you all for being here. Obviously, this is the District 15 Town Hall, so we appreciate that everybody has joined us tonight as we're looking forward to hearing from our District 15 delegation. And I will now pass the microphone over to our moderator, Saman Ahmad, our District 15 member of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee.
All right, everyone. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. How many do we have enough? We've got 58 people on the call, so let's get started. So again, my name is Saman Ahmad, and I'm the D15 member for MCDCC, the female member, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight. On behalf of the executive committee, along with my D15 colleagues on the MCDCC, Marco Rivera Oven and Andrew Sondry, we're super excited. We've got a full house and a ton of questions. So we are grateful to welcome everyone that's taken their time this evening to speak with us. I want to also recognize the electeds that are joining us for tonight's town hall. We've got State Senator Brian Feldman, we've got Delegate Lily Chi, we've got Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo, and Delegate Linda Foley, who's just finishing her first session. Along with Lily, I think both of you guys have officially, well, I guess the 4-year term officially ends. But we are very excited to hear about your work in Annapolis. It's been an unbelievable session, and you guys have come out full steam, and you're going in full steam into an election cycle as of April 15th. And as of today, we're 3 months and 1 day out. I also want to thank the D15 caucus for sponsoring the town hall, and Gail Chi, Kathy Dierkowski, Ginger McComber, and Larry Arch. A few housekeeping items. One, please note the mute button is your friend. I know that Michael and Andrew will be managing that, but in the event that there's a live Q&A, please do mute to prevent background out of respect for the speakers and the other attendees. Note that the questions were submitted in advance, and we split them up by categories, which include transportation and infrastructure, tax, healthcare, Governor Hogan, yes, and he gets his own category, environment and climate change, criminal justice reform, and election reform. Note that this is not a holistic list of all of the work that our electeds have done in advancing our interests in Annapolis, but these were some of the questions that came up, and so we broke them down in categories. If there are additional questions that you feel you want to ask, please pop them in the chat. Marco has been generous enough and agreed to moderate that, and he'll be fielding the questions to me. And Kathy Dierkowski will be keeping time. Each individual will be given 5 minutes for opening remarks. And as I said, Kathy will be keeping time. So let's get started and dive right in. So Senator Brian Feldman, we're going to start with him. And Senator, take it away.
Thank you, Saman. Thank you to D15 Caucus, the Central Committee, for putting this together. Look, the best part of this, these town halls is obviously the Q&A, so I'm going to get right to it. In 5 minutes, I got a lot to cover, but let me say though that it's really difficult to look and at this session without reflecting a bit on the 4-year term. It was a crazy, unprecedented 4-year term in Annapolis with really titanic changes. And let me just give you a sense of how things have shifted during this 4 years and where we are and where we're going. We started the 4-year term with Mike Bush as the Speaker of the House, Mike Miller as the Senate President, the longest serving presiding officers in the history of our state in those respective capacities. That obviously changed, and we have two presiding officers. Then came COVID. We adjourned for the first time since the Civil War in March of 2020. We had Zoom bill hearings, not in-person meetings for 2 years. it's permanently altered the way we do business in Annapolis. And that change in uncertainty continued actually into the last session and into this session. So prior to session, right before we started in Annapolis, we had a change in the House. Some of the chairmanships changed. The Ways and Means Committee Chair, Ann Kaiser, was given a new role. The House Economic Matters Committee Chair, Derek Davis, became our new state treasurer, replacing Montgomery County's own Nancy Kopp. Here in District 15, of course, it was mentioned earlier, our new state delegate, Linda Foley, took Kathleen Dumais' position, now Judge Dumais. And then this session at the end, literally, we had a change again in the House in terms of chairmanships. The Health and Government Operations Committee chairman resigned or is retiring. We have a new vice chair in Ariana Kelly from our District 16 in Montgomery County. A new House Appropriations Committee chair was named literally on sine die. There were new chiefs of staff for the first session this year for both the Senate president and the Speaker of the House. We had redistricting, court challenges. Now a big part of District 15 is now in Congressional 8. They used to be in Congressional 6. District 15 by contrast is largely intact. We're going to elect a new governor. Again, this year we've got November election, a new governor, a new state comptroller, a new attorney general, a new finance committee chair in our state Senate. And here, of course, in Montgomery County, we've got a county executive race. A lot is changing. A lot continues to change. And 2023 is going to look a lot different than 2022. Also, let me quickly reflect on my three House colleague you're going to hear from in a second. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo really came into his own. Subcommittee chair on transportation, really took the lead on a lot of environmental issues. A couple of years ago, it was a ban on fracking. This year was something called the Clean Cars Act. I'll let him talk about that. Has taken the lead on a lot of the big environment constituent issues, whether it's the White's Ferry or pedestrian safety issues. Lily, also finishing her first term, has found a voice in the House Economic Matters Committee. I was defending one of her bills at 11:30 at night on sine die that we got done. She can talk a little bit about that. And of course, Linda's our newest legislator, fit very nicely in the footsteps of Aruna Miller and Kathleen Dumais, and was a real partner on a lot of things she can talk about, and a partner in terms of us bringing back a record number of dollars in terms of local community projects, capital dollars, which we can get into. With that backdrop, with my 2 or 3 minutes left, we did have 2,500 bills in the legislature. I serve as the vice chair of our Senate Finance Committee, which has the broadest jurisdiction of any committee in the General Assembly. We deal with energy policy, healthcare policy, labor leave, economic development. And so I've been sort of the point guy on healthcare, energy policy, and this year it was the topic of legalization of cannabis. I think I'm going to run out of time, but in terms of healthcare, we did a lot of great things. Hopefully we can get to. I was the floor leader on a couple of the big bills in healthcare related to the issue of abortion and choice. We have the United States Supreme Court weighing in. So I was the floor leader on the biggest choice issue, abortion related topic or legislation we've had since 1992. So we can talk a little bit about that. The paid medical leave.
30 seconds.
Okay, paid medical leave bill. I was also the Senate floor leader on clean energy. We can talk about, I worked with Lily and Senator Pinsky on some things, and then cannabis policy and other several big issues that I was the floor leader on, budget issues. There's just a lot here to cover in 4 or 5 minutes a month. So I'm gonna, I guess, rather than race through and do all that in 30 seconds, I'll yield back to you, and hopefully during Q&A I can weave in some of the things we did this session. But in any event, that's my 5 minutes. I think I got in 5 minutes, not as much.
No, you hit time. Thank you so much, Senator Feldman.
Okay.
Delegate T, would you mind giving your remarks?
Not at all. Good evening. Thank you, Sama, and thank you for moderating. And I want to say, you know, today happens to be this super holiday weekend, Monday, happy Easter Monday, and happy Pastor and happy Ramadan to all who observe. Montgomery County, especially District 15, is a super diverse cultural converging points. So thank you everyone for taking the time on this important day to join us. Yes, as my senator said, I am finishing up my, just wrapping up my fourth session, and this is my final year of the first term, and what a dramatic time to join the legislature. I really could not have asked for a more impactful and a consequential time to be a state legislator, and it's such an honor. And I'm super proud of my colleague, Delegate Linda Foley. I hope she enjoyed it. I hope she enjoyed the ride. She seemed like she had a lot of fun. I want to quickly go over a few things, and then of course we want to mostly hear from you. First of all, I think we should all be very proud of how the 32-member Montgomery County delegation brought a tremendous amount of resources to our community. People often think Montgomery County is so wealthy, but we have a lot of people in need. We are a very diverse and diversifying county with a lot of socioeconomic disparities and a tremendous need. Our state funding for the county has increased to over 6% this year to over $1 billion, and the capital budget has almost doubled from last year, especially in bus rapid transit. It's really not a bus, it's rapid transit system for the county. It's over $63 million, and the USG got another dedicated funding of $5 million each for 2 years in 2024 and 25, which is right here in our backyard in District 15. Our team of District 15, 4 of us, worked together to bring funding of total of $1.5 million to 7 bond initiatives for capital improvements. So from Black Rock Center for the Arts to Madison House Autism Foundation, Ivy Mott School to Pleasant View Historical Site to South Germantown Recreation Park. And one of my favorites is the Guru Gobind Singh Foundation, the Sikh Temple Community Center, to help them expand their services for neighbors in need that they started since the pandemic. It's on Travella Road. And I also had the privilege of working with Council Member Andrew Friesen to add another $300,000 for the Scotland AME Church, which is a historical African-American church that needed a lot of repair and restoration. Beyond that, as Senator Feldman alluded to, this has been a very consequential legislative session when we passed the many significant bills. Let me just mention 2 or 3 of them that you have probably heard of. The cannabis legalization referendum will be on the November ballot. All of you will get to vote for it. And I have been assigned to the 11-member work group. Once the voters decided in November, then we'll get to work. And the other one is, of course, the Climate Solutions Now, which we will discuss more. We have 2 members on Environment and Transportation Committee. And then the paid family medical leave was mostly our committee's work, Economic Matters Committee, which they did yeoman's work to reconcile between our version and the Senate version. And we passed the Senate version. And of course, the abortion care access that you have heard a lot about. And also quickly, I had a pretty productive session. I am finishing my last year as a Deputy Majority Whip and Vice Chair of the Business Regulation Subcommittee, which is the kind of things that I love to do anyway. It has a lot to do with consumer protection issues. And I introduced several bills this session on consumer protection, from online market sale to genetic testing, as Senator Feldman said, literally at the 11th hour, more than 11th hour, almost midnight, he was on the floor defending my bill and finally passed. What it does is to put consumer in charge at all times for your genetic data if you go for genetic testing. And it's such a void in our consumer protection law in Maryland at this current stage. And I wished my road salt bill would pass, but it didn't. But I'm glad we had a very good hearing in ENT. I'm sorry, my time is up?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I would just say I did have a couple of local bills that also passed in terms of data disaggregation in MCPS, so that minority students like Asian Americans and mixed race students will not be lumped together with whites and all others in data tracking and education equity. And that is also an important issue. And I will just, wrap up my time by saying it has been another very productive session because of your ideas and advocacy. And I want to give Ginger a big shout out for her many years of advocacy on Time to Care Act. That was a big win for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Chi. I'd like to spotlight Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
All right, thank you. And thank you for hosting. I know it's not easy. Again, thank you to everybody for putting this together. And again, thanks for hosting. I'll try to go through quickly just some of the things that Senator Feldman already touched on and some things that Delegate Chi touched on. Just, I think Delegate Chi did a great job talking about the bond bills or bond initiatives. We've brought more money back to District 15 than in any year in my history. This was my ninth session. So we've brought more money back to District 15 than ever. There's a variety of reasons for that, but we're just going to take what we can get from the state and bring it back home as much as we can. So, and I think we did a great job of that. So a few things from myself, as the chair of the Motor Vehicle Subcommittee, and I serve on Environment and Transportation. So a lot of the environment and transportation bills. Climate Solutions Now was a long time coming. Last session, it failed. This session, it did not. There were three pieces of that bill that actually were my individual bills. One of them, actually two pieces. One of them has to do with the state fleet of vehicles and making sure that the state fleet, as the state buys its 3,700 vehicles that it owns, it buys electric vehicles, which is very, very important. The governor said he wanted to do that 4 or 5 years ago and only bought 4 vehicles. So we had to force that issue. Also, electric school buses. I know a lot of you have heard me talk about the importance of transitioning our bus fleet, our school bus fleet, to electric school buses. We're basically poisoning our kids when we put them on diesel school buses. So we got about 200, we got authorized about $200 million for that. We're going to allow the utilities to partner up with some of the school systems around the state. And if they want to, each one of those utilities can purchase and help transition up to $50 million. So it's a total of $200 million to get our kids out of diesel burning school buses, cleaning our air, and also backing up the grid as opposed to using coal on peak days. Also, my Clean Cars bill, which I've been working on for the last couple of years, didn't pass last year because of some Fed money problems. It didn't pass the year before because of COVID. Now we got $40 million, $10 million a year for the next 4 years for incentives for clean cars, basically electric cars, electric cars. So I'm happy to talk in detail if anybody has any specific questions on those issues. The subcommittee as a whole, you know, I know Brian didn't mention it this time because we didn't have time, but we hear about 3,000 bills a year. And in this particular case, about 90 of them came to the subcommittee that I chair. We had some bills on Vision Zero, a Delegate Polakovich car bill that we passed, which was a really great bill. We also had a Delegate Charkoudian bill that we passed, but got stuck over in the Senate, which is extraordinarily unfortunate because it's a very, very good bill. I'm trying to think. I'm happy to talk a little bit about White's Ferry. If people want to know, we can do that in the Q&A. Are we out of time? I'm sorry, I hear somebody talking.
Yeah. Don't worry, Delegate. Whitesbury is one of the questions.
Okay, so we'll
actually our first question. So I'm going to yield over to Delegate Foley, and then we'll touch on White's Ferry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Saman, and for hosting, and also thank you to the District 15 caucus, as always, for hosting this. It's great to be here. I can't tell you how exciting it is, as you can hear, to be a part of this great team, great leaders here. And I especially want to thank Senator Feldman, who carried the weight on a lot of these important initiatives on the floor of the Senate. He really, really carried the day on the floor of the Senate. That he and Delegate Chi talked about the Time to Care Act, which is the family medical leave, and Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, who also sits on the Environment and Transportation Committee with me. And I also sit on his subcommittee. I talked a lot about the environmental bills, including the Climate Solutions bill and the very important bills that he has on electric vehicles that passed. Just to highlight a couple of other things that passed in the legislature, there were some tax cuts that passed that will help working families, a family booster tax package that included tax reductions on things like diapers and oral hygiene products and other things, formula, other things that people use on a day-to-day basis that are necessities, as well as a retirement tax credit for retirees here in Maryland. Those were two very important tax initiatives that we had. There were some other tax initiatives related to work, increasing the number of jobs and so forth. I also wanted to mention that in addition to everything that the other members of the team talked about in terms of investments in Montgomery County and in District 15, there also was an important bill passed that gave tens of millions of dollars more to the universities at Shady Grove to develop a new program. So that's very important for District 15 as well. And there also was a bill that increases the investment and improvements in the MARC system, the MARC Rail Service Transformational Act that was put in by Delegate Solomon from District 18. It was another very important bill that was passed, and one that along the groundbreaking lines of the other ones that were discussed by the members of the team, we did pass a bill to ban ghost guns and to tackle the problem of untraceable firearms, as well as pass another gun safety bill.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Another gun safety bill that would require gun dealers to secure the weapons that they sell. I passed 3 bills, which I was very happy about. 2 of them had to do with towing, and I'm happy to talk about it if people are interested in it. And one has to do with Easy Pass and increasing the amount of time people have to dispute charges on their Easy Pass bills because of the problems Easy Pass has had. I did put in a bill to eliminate the use of gas-powered leaf blowers, gasoline-powered leaf blowers. That did not pass, but I intend to reintroduce it in the next session. And in the meantime, we're going to have a work group working on it in the interim. My staff, Dan Alpert, is going to put in the chat information if you are interested in working on banning gas-powered leaf blowers, which I know is a popular subject. Thank you very much for sending me to Annapolis. I think that we had a very productive session, and I'm very, very proud to be serving with this team and serving District 15. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Delegate Foley. So let's dive right into our first set of questions. It's got to do with, so we're gonna go category by category, and we'll begin by transportation and infrastructure. And so I'll yield this question over to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo on a constituent has asked, what is the update on Whitesbury?
Thank you. So we have been working as a team and with our partners on the County Council and through the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, as well as State Department of Transportation, on trying to figure out what we can do to get Whites Ferry back open. And it hasn't been as, we haven't been as excited about it as we'd like to as far as where we are. This is a private dispute originally between one business in Maryland in Montgomery County and another and a landowner in Virginia. It has then now changed because a business owner purchased the business from Montgomery County, from the landowner in Montgomery County, the business owner in Montgomery County. So now we're looking at a dispute between 2 individuals in another state, and they cannot seem to come to any resolution. We have been trying for a long time. We actually worked on a study. We got money for a study from Montgomery County and Loudoun County to put their to put some researchers together to research what's happened in the past, where the ferry is, and what the options, opportunities are in the future, and the usage, which has already been delivered, and it shows great need for Whites Ferry to be in the hands of as a public piece of transportation infrastructure. Unfortunately, that has not moved the Loudoun County commissioners to push harder on the issue, nor has it moved us toward or moved them toward a state of eminent domain, which seems like
30
kind of
seconds.
past that by now. So with that said, we're continuing to push. I was on the phone with some folks out of Poolsville this morning, and we've been pushing the governor as well to try to get the governor to make some phone calls to the new governor in Virginia, hoping that that will help. But as of yet, we're still working on it, and it is not moving nearly as fast as we had hoped. But we're still on it, and I'm happy to talk more about it if people want to talk more.
All right, thank you. So the next question is for Linda. What is the status of the proposals to add lanes to I-270 and I-495, and alternate or supplementary proposals to add bus, mass transit, rail, and an extension of Metro to Germantown and beyond? It's a loaded question.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So
There's,
let me just say that, on the I-270 495, widening proposal, toll lines proposal. We did not deal with that in the legislative session. That's a P3 project that's being managed by the governor. So we didn't really deal with that in the legislature this time at all. We did, however, as I mentioned, pass a bill to improve MARC service and expand MARC service across the state, but particularly in the Brunswick line. So that's very, very good. We also secured, I believe, and Senator Feldman could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's $20 million for a bus rapid transit line in Montgomery County. That actually was part of the deal to help fund the stadiums in Baltimore and to do some additional funding for Prince George's County. And then our piece of that was to get $20 million for the bus rapid transit project. And then in terms of extending the metro, there was a bill on metro that Mark Corman from District 16 put in that had to do with the Metro Board and funding for metro, but there was nothing about expanding metro at this point. I think metro has some work to do to get up to speed, so to speak, as to what it has now. There certainly is talk and some some speculation about expanding the metro rail out to Germantown, but I think that's a long-term proposal that probably is not in the near future. I think the bus rapid transit is real, and we should see that soon. And also the MARC improvements are very important because Germantown is the most used station on the MARC line. So those will really help, I think, in District 15 with commuting.
All right, thank you. So the next question, when will the installed overhead lights at the roundabout on 121 Clarksburg Road at West Baltimore Road be turned on by the SHA or contractors? This question is for Lily.
I kind of suspected that it might be for me because I received an email to that effect, and I replied. I think it was from probably Steve, if I remember correctly. And I promised him we'll get back to him because I just got his email and I replied yesterday over the weekend. And I have asked Elisa to follow up on that. Our office does handle a lot of these pedestrian and the safe streets kind of initiatives. And I'd be more than happy to be the point person. And we'll get back to you as soon as we hear from MCDOT or SHA in this case. Thank you.
Right,
I'm glad the lights were installed. I'm just sad to hear that they were not turning them on. And what's the point of installing lights if we don't turn them on,
Absolutely. So we'll move on to the next category, which is taxation. And this question is for Senator Feldman. What is the status of legislation to enable Maryland residents to itemize on their Maryland tax return, even if they take the standard deduction on their federal tax return? You're muted, Senator Feldman.
I mean, we didn't deal with that in particular subject this year. What we did do, and I think Linda alluded to, we did have a huge amount of budget surplus money, and we did take about, of that surplus, we took about $2.5 billion and we put it towards a rainy day fund to protect against future economic downturns. But then we took, and then of course we had the temporary gas tax holiday, which was $100 million. But we took the lion's share of sort of I would say dollars that we wanted to deploy to tax relief. And we took $1.5 billion of it over 5 years directed to retirees. We keep being told that we're not a good state for retirement. Some years ago, I had a bill that decoupled us. It's kind of what you're talking about. The estate tax exemption amounts were tied to the federal government, and then it wasn't. And then we made changes to make Maryland more friendly on that front in terms of the estate taxes. As far as this $1.5 billion, it's going to basically give relief to 80% of our retirees, 65 or older, are going to get $1,000 to $1,750 in tax relief. And so that's where we deployed the money. This year, there's a fiscal hit to the state. We have a balanced budget in Maryland. We're constitutionally required to do it. We have a AAA bond rating, one of only 11 states in the United States that can say that. So we've been very, I would say,
30 seconds
about delving too much into tax relief that isn't very targeted. That's a broad, high ticket item, and we haven't really dealt with that. We didn't this year. We might at some point. But
So then we'll pivot to the category of Governor Hogan. And Brian, this is a question for you again, is will Governor Hogan be able to make the recent successful legislative sessions into a tax cut trumpet for himself, as Linda Foley was mentioning, the tax cut packages for families?
Well, the governor, for the most part, when I can reflect on 8 years, governor almost has had no agenda of his own in terms of putting in bills. So they're almost, with the exception this year, we collaborate on healthcare. I've been sort of the point guy on creating the reinsurance program that's been hugely successful in Maryland. He can definitely take credit for that. We have the lowest individual market premiums in the United States. We've had a reduction of 30% over the last 3-4 years as a result of that. I think the governor can take credit for that, but almost everything else that you read about, the governor sees what we do, and if he likes what we do, he lets it become law without his signature, or he signs it and then he takes credit for it. Almost none of his bills in the course of 8 years has he worked. His administration doesn't testify on bills. And so, he doesn't have to actually, so the reality is he's managed to get a 70% approval number using that business model, which is you don't put in any bills, you don't really say anything. And if the legislature does something good, you can take credit for it. So whether it was the gas tax holiday or any other thing that we've done this session or in the prior 7, the governor's managed to use the bully pulpit of only having one of him, and he's there all year. We're only there for 90 days, and he's managed to do it. It's pretty, it's worked for him. Whether it'll work for a future Republican governor, I don't know.
30 seconds.
I don't know if that answers your question directly, Simone, but he himself,
No, actually it does.
any
So
of
this
these bills
segues-
that have passed. Yeah.
So then this segues into the next question really well, and it's open to anyone that wants to take it. What bills did Governor Hogan veto, and were they overridden before the session ended?
Well, there were about 10, and the audience should know that what's different about year 4 of a 4-year term as compared to the prior 3 is in years 1, 2, and 3, if we pass a bill and the governor vetoes it, we have until the following January, and actually override a veto. But in year 4, the following January is a new legislature. So under our rules, you can't do that. So what we did do is we identified about 10 bills that we rushed to his desk in sufficient time so that if he vetoed it, we would still be able to override the veto while we were still there. And that had everything to do with the Time to Care Act was one. The abortion bills were others. And we had about 7 or 8 other bills dealing with collective bargaining and prevailing wage. And we were very selective about trying to get some of those, I guess, higher profile core issues to the governor by the Friday before end of session, so that he has to act within 6 days. So we had it timed perfectly. There was, and literally we got it to him. We were able to override almost everyone. Well, all 10 that we had identified were on the override calendar or list. So, but I'd say the 2 priority ones were probably the choice issue, the abortion access issue, and the Time to Care Act. Those 2 leap out, and we were able to override the veto.
The good thing about that was I got to vote for Time to Care twice and abortion access twice. So that's the way I look at it, is we got to vote for them twice. But anyway, yes.
And that's called presentment,
yeah.
for those that don't know. And when you're going into the 4th year like that, that's called presentment. We have to get it to the governor by that date. Otherwise, we can't override the veto.
Now, one bill, I should say the one bill that we assumed that he was going to veto had to do with cannabis legalization. He cannot veto a referendum question. So one of the things I think was mentioned earlier, we're going to have a ballot question this November about whether or not to go to adult use legalization in Maryland. That's going to be a ballot question. The governor cannot veto those kinds of things. So he was stuck with that one. But the underlying implementation bill dealing with criminal justice and all the rest, expungement and things that I was very much in the middle of, we thought the governor would veto that underlying bill that would kick in if the referendum passes, and to everybody's surprise, he did not. So we sometimes we think we know the governor, but he throws a curveball, and in that case, he threw us a curveball. But the other ones were, pretty much telegraphed, and we were able to send it to him and override
But he didn't override climate solutions. He didn't sign it, but he didn't
Well,
override
that
it.
was also a shock. Okay, we all had assumed. Now, I will say that was partly because the bill that he chose to not veto was not exactly the bill the advocates wanted when it was debated for the last 2 years. So it was a bit watered down. And the reality is it got to a place where it wasn't, as ambitious, and therefore the governor let it go. But it was assumed that he would veto that one as well, but he didn't. So
Also, there was also a Child Interrogation Act that had an extensive floor debate back and forth. Yeah.
Yes, he vetoed that one.
Yeah.
He vetoed that. What that one did, that Delegate Chi mentioned, that's like Miranda rights for children. That's what that is. And it allows children to have, it requires that there be an attorney when juveniles are interrogated by police.
and I think for the audience should know, so the governor in our state has 3 choices. He can either sign a bill, he can veto a bill, but this third option is he does nothing. And if he does nothing, the bill becomes law without his signature. It's sort of his way of saying, I don't really support it, but I really don't want to have the veto overridden by this legislature, and it's maybe not that bad. So it's kind of a subtle messaging thing. So that's a third option available in Maryland that's not necessarily available either at the federal level or in many other states.
And Saman, the one thing Senator Feldman mentioned this earlier, and I really wanted to kind of dig in a little bit on it for everyone, and that is that when the governor decides just not to sign it and let it go into law, what the governor is saying at that point is, well, I don't really like the bill, but I know I don't have the votes to veto it because they're going to override me, so I'm just going to just let it go, right? And I think it's important for everyone to know that that's what the governor has been doing for the last 8 years. I mean, in our committee, and Delegate Foley will tell you because it was her first session, but she saw it. Traditionally, when we have a bill hearing, we depend on the Department of Transportation or MVA or the Department of the Environment or the Department of Agriculture or any of these departments to come and give us their expertise and take positions on bills so that we as legislators will get the information we know is well vetted and from the experts in those departments. And the governor does not allow and has not allowed any of those departments to come and testify on bills. So often what happens is you get a couple of lawyers that are staff lawyers, and some advocates, and a bunch of delegates in a room making decisions on bills. And some of the experts from the state that are being paid through Maryland tax dollars aren't able to weigh in. And that makes it really, really challenging to pass good legislation. I think it's important for people to realize that their tax dollars have gone to pay for this expertise of which we are not able to avail ourselves, nor are the residents and citizens of the state of Maryland able to, because we're not getting the best advice possible.
So moving on to healthcare. The first question is, are there any updates on the 988 bill for mental health? This question is for Lily.
I didn't get the first part about, were you mentioning a bill number?
988.
Okay, is that a HB 988?
So,
It doesn't ring a bell.
all right, so let's hold off on that one. Do we want to talk, Senator Feldman, could you talk about, I think one of the
know about this bill?
Yeah, maybe if we take a little, I do have some information on the 988, but if I could,
Okay.
could I just talk broadly about some healthcare stuff that I think is really, really important? The last 2 years have been, we have been an innovator among states in the United States of America. And I actually teach healthcare policy at University of Maryland College Park, so I'm able to kind of parlay my academia with what we're doing in Annapolis. So we've done some stuff first in the nation amongst 50 states in the last 2 years. And now let me just, if I might, just take a minute, talk about what's happened. So a year ago, we passed something called the Easy Enrollment Program, which lets you on your state tax return check a box that says, I don't have health insurance. Can you share my financial information with the Health Benefit Exchange to see if I'm eligible for Medicaid or tax credits from the federal government? A lot of people don't even know they're eligible for that stuff. It would be free healthcare, but they don't even know they're eligible. So we rolled that out about a year ago, and it's been so successful that Senator Van Hollen decided to put a federal version of the bill, and this was my bill, I'll say that, into the United States Senate. And that bill is actually being heard. So on your federal tax return, you'll be able to, first in the United States. So now 20 states have bills, just like Maryland's 2021, first state in the country to have a pharmaceutical drug pricing board. But I mentioned this, to try to get control of prescription drugs. 10 other states now have modeled what we did a year ago and 2 years ago on that front. Last year, we had something called a subsidy program, a 2-year pilot for young adults 18 to 34 to get subsidies to get health insurance, because that's the category of folks who decide they don't want health insurance. That's been hugely successful. But the reinsurance program that we rolled out 4 years ago when premiums were going up 40 and 50% has resulted literally in reductions of about 30% over the last 3 years. We have the lowest individual market premiums in the United States. That's the Obamacare exchange. And we re-upped it this session. We extended our reinsurance program by 5 years, and it's been remarkably successful. And we had groundbreaking legislation dealing with medical debt, the Medical Debt Collection Act last year. And then this year we realized that there are $60 million of hospital bills that are being collected and paid by folks who are actually eligible for free healthcare. And so we passed a bill in the Finance Committee that's going to let these folks recoup. It was $60 million per year the hospitals were collecting improperly over the last 3 years. So there's a lot happening in healthcare. We've been an innovator in the United States, and the Finance Committee has healthcare policy within its jurisdiction. And I'm happy to just kind of roll that out for the audience here. While get some other stuff, I'm going to look up some things on 988. We can come back.
Yeah, apparently there was
Can
a
I-
Senate, I'm sorry, apparently there was a Senate bill that just passed.
Right.
And it's for 988 hotline for suicide prevention and mental health help. And it looks like we did putting some $5 million funding. So that's a good start. That was probably what the question was referencing. So we did just putting some funding this year.
And Simone, if I may add, just very quickly, I started to mention it earlier, we ran out of time, but I think it's important for everyone to know that in 90 days, we do more work, not tooting our own horn, but to a degree I'm going to, than Congress does in years. I mean, we hear over almost 3,000 bills, and we pass somewhere between 350 to 400 bills. The rest of them die, the rest of them are voted down, the rest of them are withdrawn. So it's really hard to necessarily, when we have that kind of bill volume, it's hard to know exactly what the status is of each bill, which is why you see Delegate Chi and Feldman, and I was looking myself, and Delegate Foley are probably like, what is HB 988? What is that? Which one was that? What happened to it? Where did
It's a hotline.
So
It's a new thing.
I think it's important for people to just know that. That's why you see us feverishly sometimes, because if it doesn't come to our committee, it's really hard to know what happened to it. We relied very heavily on the committee structure in Annapolis, not completely, but very heavily.
So if we move over to environment, this is, David's favorite topic. So the question is, sorry, but this is another status question, but what has happened to the community choice energy pilot for Montgomery County that passed in 2017?
Community choice. Brian, do you want to take that one? Was that your and
Yeah, so
Delegate Charkoudian's bill,
Delegate
wasn't it?
Charkoudian and
Yeah,
I
we
worked
worked
on
on
that
that
in the
too.
2021 session. And so Montgomery County was given basically a pilot project that we authorized Montgomery County to be able to form an aggregation group, pull resources. It's done elsewhere in the United States, and would allow Montgomery County to purchase clean energy on its own through this group. The pilot, though, we call it a pilot, but the reality is it's like a 5 or 6 year pilot. And so this first year was really to hire consultants. I mean, there's a lot involved. And so that has not kicked in yet, but it is Montgomery County. And the hope is that if Montgomery County pulls it off and it works, then other counties who are kind of itching to do it as well. We tried to make it a statewide idea, but the reality is it was a pilot that passed in the 2021 session out of the Finance Committee, and Delegate Charkoudian, deserves a lot of credit for it. But that has not yet kicked in. The aggregation group itself, some of the mechanics and the legal aspects of it have not been finalized, but it's still a work in progress.
Yes, and my committee, Montgomery County House Delegations Economic Development Committee, which I chair, worked on that to advance it on our side before it became before it could even go to the whole chambers to be considered. Yeah, it is actually a 7-year pilot, and it's probably the second year being implemented right now, but we'll keep you posted. And actually, California, it's not like we are starting something that has never been tested. Other states have had such precedents, like the state of California.
Right, and we can't actually roll it out until we get the approval of the Public Service Commission, our state regulator. So there's a lot of hoops that we have to get through before we actually launch, so.
Fantastic. So now that the CSA has passed, what will we be doing differently in addition to what we are planning to do to reach our much needed CO2 reduction goals in Maryland? How will we further protect and enhance natural habitats and prime agricultural lands in the process?
Who do you want to take that? You want Dave to take that one?
Why not, David? The first one was for you, so Brian ended up taking it, so you can take this one.
Yeah, look, those are really good, complicated questions. There are statewide goals, there are county-wide goals, and in some cases they're in conflict with each other, particularly in some cases in the ag reserve, there's conflict about, solar, what goes in as solar, what classifies as ag. We have, I think, 93,000 acres of preserved agricultural land. And the rest of the state is kind of looking at Montgomery County to some degree to see what Montgomery County does in that particular instance. As far as the preservation of farmland is concerned, I think that we have to kind of thread that needle specifically on a statewide basis. This is not going to be really particularly easy to do. I mean, there's new crops coming up all the time. There is a lot of issues when it comes to Pennsylvania and the Conowingo Dam, and a lot of nutrients and debris and pollution that comes over that dam that really does a lot of damage to the upper part of the Chesapeake Bay. And the farmers in Maryland are doing a much better job. It doesn't mean that they're done. There's still a lot to do, but they're doing a much better job than Pennsylvania is. I actually put in a bill this year, which is the same bill I had in about 5 years ago, as a kind of a shot across the bow to Pennsylvania to tell Pennsylvania to stop polluting. So it was a boycott on Pennsylvania. So the state of Maryland government, the government of the state of Maryland wouldn't purchase anything from the state of Pennsylvania that it didn't absolutely have to. The bill didn't get out of committee, but that wasn't really the point. The point was to tell Pennsylvania, you got to stop doing this. We do have a new EPA, a new EPA administrator, Adam Ortiz, who was the former Department of the Environment head for Prince George's County, then Montgomery County. Now he's not. He's at the EPA, and I know he's working on this issue with Pennsylvania as well. And I'm happy to go into more detail. I know we're kind of out of time on this issue.
So this is just an ice.
Can I just add one quick thing? Because when we talk about the environment and clean energy and solar, so in 2019, I sponsored the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is going to take us to 50% renewable energy in Maryland by 2030. In fact, Lily Chi was the deciding vote in the House of Delegates Committee to get that bill passed and enacted. But we got to also think about clean energy in terms of economic development, and we called it the Clean Energy Jobs Act because that bill is likely to produce 20,000 solar jobs in Maryland by 2030. And I had a bill this year dealing with offshore wind. So when we talk about the environment and we talk about these kinds of policy calls, it should also be discussed in the context of a lot of upside economic potential for Maryland. And the last couple of years, we've been focused on how do we do it in a way. In fact, the offshore wind, we had a huge announcement by US Wind in Baltimore County, a huge facility that's going to be a massive job creator. And we talked about solar, but they're in conflict with other policy goals. And so these create some real significant tensions between organized labor and the environmental community politically, that it's a real challenge, and we see it in Annapolis. And so I just sort of the politics of this gets complicated. When we were talking about coal-fired power plants in Maryland and trying to close it, it had the possibility of the loss of union jobs. And so it was so when we have the conversation, I just want to throw that into the mix for the audience, that it sometimes gets politically complicated there with conflicting interest groups. So.
And if I could just add some on, oh, I'm sorry.
I'll just very quickly, there is also possibilities, and I think people should see exactly what Senator Feldman said, and that is there are win-win opportunities. When we talk about geothermal, which uses a fraction for heating and air conditioning as traditional HVAC systems are concerned, those can be good union jobs that are down, in the ground, fitting pipes together, figuring out how to make geothermal work, not only for homes, but for big businesses and schools. Those are really good union jobs, and those are really good transitions from laying down natural gas pipe or methane pipe or oil pipe to laying down good geothermal pipe. It's very similar, and there's some job opportunities there. Sorry, Linda.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't. I just wanted to add that in addition to what Delegate Fraser Hidalgo and Senator Feldman were talking about, and that tension is very real. I come from the labor movement, and I hear that a lot about some of these bills. But the other side of this, in terms of clean energy, is the things that we did in the Climate Solutions Now Act. As Brian mentioned, as Senator Feldman mentioned, that wasn't as robust as it started off to be. So there's some work to do there in the area of building standards, making buildings more energy efficient. There's a lot we can do there that we need to work on. And then also on the renewable energy portfolio standards about what does constitute renewable energy. We need to do some work there because there's some strange things like trash burning that is considered part of that renewable energy, clean energy under those standards. So there are some other things we can do on not just on the job creation or the clean energy creation angle, but also on the reduction in fossil fuels and greenhouse gases angle.
Thank you, Delegate Foley. So Delegate Foley, let's just pivot over to criminal justice reform. What reasons did Republicans articulate to explain their opposition to the ghost gun bill?
I have to say that, and I think Delegates Fraser Hidalgo and Chi will agree with me on this, that Delegate Leslie Lopez in the House was the lead on this bill, and she did an outstanding job arguing and being the floor leader on the bill, refuting all of the arguments that they brought up. I think the main argument that they raised was the ones, a lot of the ones that you always hear when it comes to guns. You're punishing law-abiding gun owners, because there are bad actors, that kind of thing. There was also a lot of give and take about how you register a gun and whether that was a good process. But the arguments were really, I think, very weak. And part of that is because Delegate Lopez just did an outstanding job making really an ironclad case for why these ghost guns need to be banned and why unregistered firearms need to be serialized. She really did an excellent job. And I don't think that initially they raised a lot of arguments, but eventually there just wasn't any place for them to go. So, I didn't hear anything really very unique there. I don't know, Dave, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo and Delegate Chi, I don't know if you heard anything else that was interesting.
I think it came to, at least for our district, one of the things to note from Montgomery County is that the Magruder shooting, my understanding, was a ghost gun. And then, I was on the House floor, I guess, a week before the end of session or 5 days before the end of session. And my daughter texts me from Rocky Hill Middle School to tell me that there's a shooter and they're locked down at Rocky Hill. They picked up the person, but they had a ghost gun on them, and I think 3 more ghost guns at home. So I think that the Republicans did what they could to kind of sow some doubt into whether this bill was going to do anything. But I did see, and we didn't get to introduce former Maryland State Delegate Kathleen Dumais, now Judge Dumais, who's been leading on this issue in the past as well. And this is the first time we actually got something kind of through. But if we're not going to work on these particular bills, on these ghost gun bills, any year, this is the year to do it. And I'm very happy that we got through what we got through. I wish in some ways it was more, but I think that Delegate Lopez did a good job on the floor. So that's all.
Thank you so much. So Senator Feldman, could you please walk?
Can I just say, wait, before Judge Dumais is on the ballot, so I'm just going to give her a plug. We gotta get her the full. So I just got to throw my D15 former colleague a bone there.
As a judge, not as a delegate. Okay.
Correct. She's running as a judge. She will be on the ballot as a judge. And
Judge Dumais,
Sorry.
it's very,
yeah.
it's nice to, it's a nice ring.
It
to hear
does.
Judge
So always be
Dumais.
part of the D15 team, though.
True.
Could you please walk us through the next steps for the legalization of marijuana in the state?
Sure. So I had legislation, as did Luke Clippinger, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. They ended up being the same bill. So this year we pretty much did a couple of things, but we focused almost entirely on criminal justice reform, expungements, all these things that will kick in if the referendum in November passes. The next step after, assuming the referendum passes in November, most people expect, based on polling, that it will. We will join the political landscape, I should say, in the country is shifting pretty dramatically on this subject. When we first passed medical cannabis, we were one of the first states in the country to do that. Now we're up to 37 states. Now there are 18 states, full-blown adult use legalization. Just in the last year, we've seen New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Virginia's moving that way, District of Columbia. So we do want to get the product out of the illicit market, regulate it, test it, tax it. And so if the referendum passes in November, I think that in January, now that we've dealt with criminal justice and we have the political backing of the folks who are the voters of this state, I think we will focus then on market structure and a framework to actually have, like we did with the medical cannabis program. I mean, just to say, we have 150,000 Marylanders right now who are registered medical cannabis users. It's a $600 million business right now here in the state of Maryland. And so we are going to try to use best practices. There's an advantage to being state 19 and not state 1. And social equity.
30 seconds.
Social equity will be a big part of it. We're going to take a lot of the tax revenue and reinvest it back into those communities that have been impacted by prior enforcement policies. But the next thing in January will be focusing on licensing and a market structure and getting product out of the illicit market. And that's kind of, I think, where we're heading, assuming the ballot passes in November issue. So
the next question is a lighter question. What was the funniest thing that happened during session? Anyone can take this, or everyone can take this.
Okay, I'll try this one. So we were beleaguered by the time we got to April, and our Senate President Bill Ferguson on a Friday was leaving open the possibility that we may have to come in over the weekend on Saturday the 2nd. And so as it turns, April 1st, of course, he pulled it off brilliantly. He told us that we were going to have to come back Friday night at 5 or 6 o'clock, and this was about noon. And you saw a collective sigh in the entire Senate chamber because we believed every word he was saying, and we were fatigued. It was Friday. We really, really wanted to go home for the weekend. And then he broke it to us that, in fact, it was April 1st, and then we got it. And he's not a naturally really funny guy, but this was as good as I've ever seen him. And it was good. It was very good. He pulled it off.
We had a similar thing in the House when they gave that piece of paper that was supposed to be for the majority leader to the minority leader. That was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, and then he ended his shtick by saying,
it wasn't so
see,
hard.
being majority leader isn't that hard.
Yeah, right. Just need to switch the party.
So again, these are for everyone, and everyone can go around in seniority. What were the highlights and or biggest disappointments this session? And have you identified your 2023 priorities based on any failed bills from this session?
You said disappointments or things you were proud of?
What were the highlights and
Okay.
or biggest disappointments during this session? And have you identified any 2023 priorities?
Well, I'll just lead off. I thought, being the floor leader, defending the abortion access bill and the Time to Care Act, for me was, I had a lot of incoming flack from every Republican in the Senate had a question for me over the period of a couple hours in the Time to Care Act. And similarly with the abortion issue. So that was, I had a lot of incoming over, a period of several hours in both bills. And I felt good, where we ended up. I would say we didn't get as far on the cannabis legalization bill as I had hoped. I thought that beyond the referendum, I thought we could do a little more on the market structure stuff. So that's definitely going to be a 2023 item. So these are pretty complicated issues, but I would say those are the three that stand out for me this session. So.
I'll pick it up from here. I think the highlights we already kind of mentioned and discussed it tonight, such as climate solutions, cannabis legalization referendum, paid family medical leave, and abortion care, those kind of banning those kinds. These are all huge, significant bills. On the personal front, I wish to, and I talked to the Speaker's office about this, as well as the majority leader. I wish that we had done more to help small businesses, because last year's one-time relief was significant, but its lasting impact is devastating to a lot of businesses. Even though Montgomery County probably weathered the pandemic a little bit better than others with a lot of federal assistance, but many businesses are still struggling, and we really need to expand the tax base. So I introduced several bills to remove some bureaucratic barriers, and everybody thought they were great ideas, but for whatever reason, they just not get out of the committees or the House. So there are some elements of disappointment, because my team and I and all of us have worked very hard on the bills that we believe in that could help people, and my bill that for the third year that we passed the House, which is to help the students with the hearing disabilities. The educational interpreter bill that got stalled in the Senate. That was disappointing. And also the road salt bill that we worked for 2 years on, and even the department is already working on it. For whatever reason, I'm gonna blame Delegate Linda Foley and Delegate David Frazier-Hidalgo. I'm just kidding, because you both serve on the committee. I'm actually gonna blame your chair.
Lily, I co-sponsored that bill.
I'm just kidding. I'm gonna blame Chair Kumar Babe because you both serve on the committee. And I told you guys, this is my only bill in front of your committee this session to reduce road salt. But legislation is hard, and you just keep chugging away. And thank you for co-sponsorship. It was a total joke.
Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Sure. So from a personal front, I guess I would say that, some of these bills I've worked on for years, carbon pricing, which I think is a great idea. I've worked on for years, which I didn't get across the finish line this year. It's a big bill. I've had it for 4 years. It's probably going to be several more before it gets to the point where we can get that bill across the finish line. But with that said, transportation is the #1 contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. It's over 30% in the state of Maryland. So the last couple of years, I've worked really hard on trying to, reduce that impact on our environment from a public health perspective, from an environmental perspective, and from a diversification of utility and electric storage, which is the next big holy grail. So for me, the big highlights with the bills that were passed were the 3 bills that I mentioned, the $40 million for clean cars, or for incentives for electric cars. That is huge. It took me 2.5 years, 3 years to get that bill across the finish line. We've never had this much money for clean cars. So for all of us, for everybody on this call, everybody that's watching, it goes into operation in fiscal year 2024, which is next year. So think about transitioning. Also, the school buses, getting kids off of school buses. I've had both of my kids down there testifying on transitioning away from diesel school buses. I can't believe we've done that for so many generations, but we are now transitioning, and Montgomery County is actually leading the way. They did a private deal 2 years ago, $158 million deal, largest deal in the country. So I'm proud of that as well. And the transition for the 3,700 cars, but all of these are great steps in the right direction, because every single one of them, somebody's going to be driving in an EV and someone's going to get a ride in it, and they're going to say, I want one, because they're better. They just are better in every way, but people don't know that yet. And as they start buying them, we'll just slowly be, cleaning our environment. And I think that transition is going to happen way, way faster than people realize it. And some of the big car manufacturers like General Motors and Ford and some of the others are really going to be rushing to catch up and keep up. So very excited about all that.
All right, Delegate Foley.
Thank you. It's already been mentioned, what is so exciting to me about what we were able to do in this legislative session. Certainly the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act is something that I've been working on at the federal level and now at the state level since 1984. So to see a paid family leave come to fruition here in Maryland and to be a part of that was so exciting for me. I was also very excited about the expansion for abortion care access and what that will mean to the women of Maryland and really the women from other states, because we're going to see a lot of women coming to Maryland as other states limit abortion more and more and more. And I was thrilled to be a part of the Climate Solutions Act and to be able to work on that with Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, the other members of the committee, and he outlined the significant contribution he's made to that after working for years on it. I got to work on it during this session, and what's in that bill is so important for the future. So those were really, some of the highlights. I was also thrilled to be able to get 3 bills passed, including one that is a really good consumer bill for people who have been impacted by the debacle at Easy Pass and the Maryland tolling agency. But what was disappointing to me was I didn't get farther on my gas-powered leaf blower ban that I really want to get passed, and that's a goal for me in 2023 to get that passed and to take a look at some of these other areas where we can do better in terms of clean energy. And that's one thing that I want to do in 2023. And then I think the other thing looking forward is we did entertain the idea of passing a constitutional amendment or having a ballot initiative on a constitutional amendment, putting abortion rights in our Maryland Constitution. I think we're going to have to do that because I think Roe v. Wade is going to be thrown out by the Supreme Court, and we're going to have to do that. But I'm very excited about the prospects of doing all those things and more in the future.
All right, thank you. So that wraps up the submitted questions for the evening. We can take 2 questions. Does anyone have any questions for our speakers? You can raise your hand and I can call on you. Saqib?
Hi, everybody. This is the same question I just asked in the chat. I've always wondered, we rushed these, Senator Feldman mentioned that these bills were rushed to the governor's desk so that his veto could be overridden because this is the 4th year and we really need to override the vetoes. I've always just wondered why that's reserved for election years. Like, it seems to me that whenever we can put in place a policy or a law that has a beneficial effect to the community, we should do so as soon as possible. And I just wish, I wish we would do it. Democrats in Annapolis would do it more often and not just in election years.
Well, first of all, prior to Governor Hogan, when we had Governor O'Malley, it depends a little who's on the second floor. And then
right, of course,
even these bills, don't forget, if they're not emergency bills that take effect immediately upon the signature of the governor, they have effective dates. And so most of the bills aren't actually effective until October of 2022. So in order to make it, impactful immediately, they have to be designated emergency legislation, which requires a supermajority vote. It's not a simple majority. So there are some practical, but we probably could selectively, to your point, some of the bigger bills in years 1 through 3, designate them emergency, make the effective dates earlier, but we do that. But year 4 is different because of the reasons I did mention. But
like Vaughn's bill about the immigration ICE.
Well, so that's a good example, because if we wanted to push it to an emergency bill, we probably wouldn't have had the votes in the House and the Senate.
Right,
Right.
it didn't need to be an emergency bill, right? It could have, we could have passed it earlier. The governor's veto would take effect because that bill went into effect in October. So
Right, but
by,
okay, but the veto override wouldn't change the effect. It still wouldn't go anywhere until October of 2020. Okay, but I hear you. I mean,
right, but now it's October a year later, right?
All right. Any additional questions, anyone? David Miller and then Steve Levy.
Sure, I'll just ask a quick question about 9A because since I've known, I don't remember a split district in Montgomery County. We used to all have inside the county, and also we have incumbent Republicans there, which could also change the dynamics of the Montgomery County delegation. Just wanted your thoughts of what you think of 9A.
I can take a stab at that. I think you're right, Dave. I think it is new. I don't have quite the history to know that if it's ever occurred before. I do think that I'm not sure that there is the possibility of getting Republicans, but my understanding is that the 9A portion of the district is just Montgomery County. And then the other portion is Howard County, 9B is Howard County. And so the chances of getting a Republican in that district are what they would be in the rest of Montgomery County. I think where it will matter more is in the Senate. And I think it actually helps, Senator Hedelman. I mean, Brian could weigh in on that.
Well, no, we're talking about Senator
Hester.
Katie Fry Hester. So
Oh, Fry Hester, I'm sorry, Fry Hester.
Right. So Montgomery County now has 8 full senators. With this potential, if Katie Fry Hester wins, we would have 8+. David, there is actually precedent. Back prior to 2002, District 14 had sub-districts that was partly in Howard County and partly in Montgomery. It was a 14A and a 14B. So this isn't the first time. And then after the redistricting back in 2002, because Montgomery had grown in such population, we went from 7.5 senators to a full-blown 8, all self-contained in Montgomery. Now we're going potentially from 8 to 8.25, 8.5. So it's not ideal, but there is precedent going back prior to 2002. And then the 2002 redistricting, we went full-blown 8 full senators. And District 14 was 3 full-blown Montgomery County delegates as opposed to 14A and 14B. But it does have a huge impact potentially in the Senate, because we now have 8, and if Senator Hester were to win, we would have represented by 8.5 senators, the largest Senate delegation in Annapolis. Right now, we're 8.
Yeah.
We're
How's that work, that half? Does she caucus with
well,
both?
so so that'll be up to the delegation. Back again, District 14 analogy, the delegates did have a part vote. They were like a half vote. It's totally up to the bylaws. The delegation can decide however it wants to decide how to dole out a vote, a half vote, quarter vote, or whatever. That's not going to be dictated by the presiding officers. That'll be entirely up to the delegation how to deal with that.
Okay.
All right,
Be
Steve
interesting.
Levy.
Yeah, you talked about retirees and reducing, or seniors reducing their tax load. And the question I have is, have you thought about trying to compete with like Florida and Delaware, where so many people leave or have 2 homes and one's down in the other state, we lose the tax revenue? Can you address that as a discussion? I don't know what the losses are to the state when someone leaves the state. Or
We're talking about states that have no income tax. Okay, Florida has no income tax. I don't think there's any discussion in Maryland about getting rid of our income tax. So that's it. But we are not, it is a fair statement. We have tried piecemeal to make Maryland a more friendly state to retire. I mentioned earlier, the estate tax exemption amounts used to be much lower than the federal amounts, and we upped that to try to recouple. This provision we did this year dealing with tax relief for our seniors who make 100,000 single, 150 for a couple, I think is helpful. But there, I remind you, we again have a constitutionally mandated balanced budget requirement, unlike the federal government, which can print money. And if we do something like that, we're going to have to take money away from somewhere else. If we were to do kind of full-blown get rid of an income tax and go to a different model, we might have to cut K through 12 education. We might have to raise tuition at the University of Maryland. We may have to. So the balanced budget requirement that we have at the state level, unlike the feds, really would require us to make some very, very difficult choices. But that's not really a direct answer, but we've tried piecemeal when we have some money to provide some tax relief, particularly to our seniors, like we did in the 2022 session. But it's not a perfect answer, you know, because Florida, again, has no income tax at all, as does Arizona, Texas, and that's a whole different business model,
I think where this might help us, Senator Feldman, is competing with Pennsylvania, keeping retirement, because Pennsylvania does not tax retirement income. I think
that is true. I'm from Pennsylvania. Both Linda and I are native Pittsburghers, so I'm aware of that fact. And we have looked at it, and we have a certain amount that's not taxable. Pension income is not taxable up to a certain amount, so it's not completely all. And we have raised that amount over time. But the price tag, they have had that in law for a long, long time in Pennsylvania. I mean, it would be great to get there, but there is a cost associated with that, a big price tag for sure. We have done it with first responders and then police. We've done it in certain categories where we've exempted, and then we raised the amount of exempt pension number that's exempt from state taxation. But to go full blown, not tax at all would be a big price tag.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're about to wrap up tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Dierkowski to make a few announcements regarding the D15 caucus and things to look forward to before I ask all the delegates and the senator to do closing remarks.
Yes, so as you know, primary elections are July 19, and we highly recommend voting by mail. Just go to the Board of Elections website to apply if you haven't. If you haven't reserved your tickets for the May 22nd MCDCC Spring Brunch, please do so. And for precinct officials, we will be collecting the money so we can sit together. So contact me or Gail to be included. For the latest information on candidate forums, please check the MCDCC newsletter. The Upcounty Democrats will have a D2 forum this Wednesday. On election day and for early voting, we need volunteers at the polling site. So mark your calendars, especially precinct officials. We need you. So don't go anywhere. I will be sending to the precinct officials the new boundary changes for our precincts. We will also be contacting you with information on our next meeting. Anyone interested in being a precinct official, please contact me or go to the MCDCC website to apply. And that's it.
All right, fantastic. So we're actually quite on time. So I'm going to give 2 minutes to each member, closing remarks, and then we'll close out for the night. And I want to thank everyone for their patience in joining us tonight.
Okay, just a minute. Well, first of all, I want to thank our great moderator and the great District 15 caucus for a great evening here. I just want to real quickly touch on something Lily very briefly mentioned. The one area looking ahead to the next session or the next year, I think as a state and as a county, we really have to do a lot better on job creation. Right now, historically, the state of Maryland was always a point or two below the national average when it came to unemployment. Right now, as of today, we're at 4.6% unemployment, whereas the national rate is 3.6. We're a full point above the national average. We've got to do a much better job on the job creation front vis-a-vis Virginia and other states and our neighbor. And I look forward to working particularly with Delegate Chi, who's been a real champion of economic development, and my other teammates. So I will stop there. But again, a lot of great questions tonight. Look forward to working with everybody moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, Samal. As everyone is acknowledging, great job. Thank you for your active engagement. And I'm just, I want to emphasize again how honored and privileged I am to be part of this wonderful team representing our district, our diverse district in Annapolis. And I've always learned so much every single session. I'm amazed. The more I learn, the more I feel like I need to learn, you know. So thank you for putting your trust in us, letting us be your voice in Annapolis, and for your continued engagement. The session might be over, but our work is not. There's always so much to do. So please continue to reach out to us and give us ideas. As I mentioned, my team and I have been very much engaged in some of the pedestrian safety issues. So on that front, we're very pleased that you know, to see some new streetlights installed and crosswalks built up, and just continue to use us as a liaison in that regard. And also finally, as Gail said, let's get out, and Kathy, their leadership, let's get out the votes, make sure everyone is aware of the changed election time, and register to vote in the primary elections, especially in immigrant communities. Thank you.
David?
Thank you. So just a big thank you to everybody involved in putting this together. We always do one pre-session and then we do one post-session. It's kind of interesting to see how they go, how the forums go before and after, if we actually were able to do everything we wanted to do that we said we were going to do. So, and I think that, you know, Lily did a really great job of summarizing. Look, we, you know, I can speak for myself. I love what I do. I love this. I love being a delegate. I love doing what I do. I love working on environmental issues. I love working on transportation issues. I love working on, as Brian said and Lily said, economic development issues. There's so much synergy and so much opportunity, as well as what we do out of session, the 90 days and then out of session. And so I guess a big thank you to everybody for allowing us and helping us and supporting us doing it. A big shout out to the team. You know, I love working with everybody on the team. As you can see, we all get along really, really well. That's not always the case in other districts. And whatever you can do to support us so that we can continue to support everybody else moving forward in the next election cycle. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
All right, Linda, closing out the night.
Thank you, Salman. Let me add my thanks to you and to the District 15 caucus. And I also want to give a big shout out to my teammates here, Senator Feldman, delegates Frazier, Hidalgo, and Chi, and Delegate Chi, for, you know, just for the great work that you all do and the great leadership that you showed and the great help that you gave me. I think when people say, well, what did you learn this session? Well, I think the biggest thing I learned this session is that, you know, people always talk about how it takes a village. Well, really in Annapolis, it takes a team. It really takes a team. We have a great one here in District 15, and none of this would have happened if we all in Annapolis weren't working together to achieve these great results for our district and for our state. And so I'm just really privileged to be one of 4 members of this team working together to, you know, for your benefit and for the benefit of all of us. And I think that's what brings success for us in the General Assembly. So I want to say thank you to the teammates. I also want to say thank you to all the voters and residents of District 15. It truly is an honor and a privilege to be there serving you and representing you with this great group of leaders. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your great questions, and thank you for your continued engagement. And please vote. As Kathy Durkowski said, please don't forget to vote. However, we make it easy for you, so make sure you get that ballot in. Even though it's vacation season, you can still cast your ballot. So thank you very much.
I don't think anyone could have put it better than Linda. I think our next task is getting out the vote. It's July 19th. Please mark your calendars. If you're on vacation, please vote early. Everything is on the Board of Elections website. And yes, we need precinct officials. We need a whole slew of volunteers. It's all hands on deck. It's the year we have to get the governor's house back. And that's what the Dems are going to do moving forward. So thank you so much, Senator, delegates. for your time tonight, but most importantly, thank you for your service and your commitment to D15, as well as Montgomery County and the state of Maryland. This is a very difficult job. It's for 3 to 4 months of a roller coaster, but still your service continues throughout the year. And we are tremendously grateful for that. Oftentimes, many do not see the work that is going on behind the scenes. But, you know, constituent services is so important, such an important part of your work. And extremely grateful and privileged to be able to have this conversation with you all tonight. So thank you and have a good night, everyone.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
joining us.
Have a good evening.
Take care.